Florida State versus Memphis. Can the Noles get in the win column? We're hoping that that's what's going to happen this week. Michael, thanks for joining me. It's time to talk about this Florida State versus Memphis game here. We got a couple other topics we want to hit on too. So, Nole Nation, thanks for joining us. We're hoping to have something positive to talk about this week after the start to this season. So, we're going to take a little bit of a positive tone on this one. Just kind of like I make that joke, like the bug to the bug zapper. You just kind of keep coming back, hoping that things are going to work out better this week.
Oh man!
But it's just been such a negative start to the season. We're just looking for something positive. So, you're hoping that Florida State, again, inside Doak Campbell Stadium, can get this thing right and actually get in that win column for the first time in 2024. So, Michael, thank you for joining me. And how are you, my friend?
Well, yeah, I'm so glad to be here, Jesse. Thanks for having me. Listen, I thought I was sleeping for the last 3 weeks.
I know. Like, I wish I was.
I know, right? I woke up. I was like, this has to be a dream. So I woke up this morning. I was like, this has to be a dream. And I popped up my ESPN app and said, you know what? Let me make sure. They're probably 2-0, and I just dreamed this. Nope, they're 0-2, man. So this is not a dream. This is not a drill. This is for real. But yeah, I'm hopeful that Florida State can get off the schneid and get something in the win column this week.
Yeah, and I will say, man, I think the bye week is good for the team. And I think it's good for us fans, too. I think we all needed a mental break from watching this team play on Saturday, at least for or Monday or whatever day, just for 1 week. But you're hoping, man, that this is such a crucial week because you feel like if Florida State can just get, any kind of positive momentum at this point, that maybe it can be a spark that gets this thing kind of rolling a little bit, get some belief back in this program.
Yes. Well, can I say real quick, though, wasn't it great, though, to be able to sit and watch college football Saturday, not worry about Florida State taking L's and watching other programs take L's?
Oh, it was great to watch Notre Dame lose and all these other teams.
Yes, it was.
And not have, I love a stress-free Saturday. I love it, man. But if they lose this game, then you go 0-3 and you lose to a G5 team, it's gonna. I think your season's a rapid. It's already hanging on it's on life support.
Yes.
But you at this point, I think you worry about losing the locker room and the fan base and things like that if you lose this game. So this. I know sometimes it's hard to say must wins for teams because you still got 9 more games to play. But man, this feels like a must win because if you're coming off a bye week and then you come out and lose at home to a G5 team, man, that's going to be tough. So we're going to talk about it today. We're going to get into all that. But first, we have some kind of bigger picture news that we want to talk about before we get into this. So obviously, we said we're trying to be positive, but the first bit of news is not exactly positive. Mike Norvell announced this week that running back Jalen Lucas is out for the season. This is a tough one, man. He sustained an injury against Boston College, not something that we even knew. I didn't suspect anything like that. This is a tough one, man, because he was one of your most electric, one of your only bright spots on offense so far this season. He actually led all FSU running backs by 2 yards per carry, had also had some big plays in the pass game. He was also one of your kick returners. Now, we hadn't really done a whole lot on kick return yet.
Right.
But, at this early in the season, man, this is a pretty tough loss. Again, he's just one of your more electric players that Mike Norvell just talked about. We got to find a way to get this guy to be a bigger part of the game plan, and now he's out for the season. So, man, it's just the hits just keep coming for Florida State. Look, man, I'm at this point, I'm ready to die on the hill that we need to change the logo back because, my goodness, man. You look at the COVID season that got taken from Leonard Hamilton, the playoff snub, the check swing and the College World Series, player injuries, what are we doing here? We got to try something, man. But yeah, man, this is a big loss for this offense that's already been struggling to find its way.
Absolutely. I remember there's an episode of Parks and Rec where they're about to do this really big fair carnival thing on Indian burial ground. And so all this bad luck was kind of happening. And I keep thinking, dadgummit, when are we going to change this logo back so all the luck of Florida State will come back, man? What has been happening to us? But yeah, for sure, man. When it rains, it pours. And man, Jalen Lucas was one of the few, and there were very few bright spots about this team. And so you're really excited to what you saw, even in the Georgia Tech game. You were you saw early on how he could be leveraged, and then he kind of went away. And you're like, oh gosh. Then in the Boston College game, he was featured a lot more there. You know, and so it's just so unfortunate. And obviously, thoughts and prayers go out to him. And you know, he's going to come back stronger than ever. And the best part about it is he's a true junior.
Yeah.
So he's got another season next year, and I imagine that he'll be back. And you know, unless some other school wants to pay him more money, which seems to be the theme right now. But I imagine he'll be back next year. Yeah, gosh, just what's so frustrating about that whole thing, though, is like you lost Destiny Hill, who's going to be like your star slot player. Then you lost Jalen Lucas, who was not only your star slot player, but also the player out of the backfield that was doing the most. Right. And so it's like your all-star kick returner. Like this whole dynamic was just like, oh, it's so frustrating.
I know. No, I agree. Now, Mike Norvell did say that he could, you know, because it's only been 2 games.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
You can also qualify for the red shirt this year.
Yeah.
So, you know, we'll see. I mean, we'll see how much more you can get out of him. Maybe 1, even 2 seasons. We'll see.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a big loss for this offense. And like you said, he was one of the very few bright spots, but man, he was electric when he got the ball. So it hurts. Now, this will open the door for some other guys. Mekhi Danzy has been a name that has been mentioned. That's a guy that we heard a lot about in camp, a guy that we've been told has elite speed. We've been told a lot of things out of camp, but you know, we'll see. But hopefully this is an opportunity for guys to seize that moment. And because sometimes you never know, man. Sometimes a guy can step up with an unexpected opportunity and it may provide a spark for this offense. Who knows? Some other injury news to touch on. We'll go ahead and kind of get the other negative out of the way. Now, look, some people are taking this different than we are.
Yeah.
I'm taking the news about Byers as he's still going to be out. Now, it's not as bad as Jalen Lucas. Mike Norvell said, we'll see how JB progresses, but it's not expected to be long-term. Now, he was listed as a starter on the depth chart versus Boston College, but did not play.
Correct.
And some people are like, "Oh, well, he's on the depth chart." Well, you know, they don't really go by these depth charts.
Correct.
So just given that he was listed as BC, didn't play, and the way that Mike Norvell kind of framed that news, to me, it sounds like he's not going to play versus Memphis. But you're hoping that if it's not long term, that maybe he's like a week to week, day to day type of thing. And he can get back soon. But that is something that sounded to me more like he's not going to be here than he is.
Right.
We did see last week that it was a combination of Rob Scott and Jalen Early filling in. Now, I will say, like, I think some of the things that you're seeing from Jalen Early are promising. I would like to see him get more snaps.
Right.
He only played 20 snaps in that game. And I do have to mention that when you look at PFF grades, the trenches are already the hardest to get. And the fewer the snaps that you have, the harder it is to really trust that grade. But with that being said, he was the highest graded offensive lineman in that BC game. So that's a guy that I would certainly like to see get more snaps at least, you know, throughout the season to develop him for this year and for next year. So not the greatest news with Byers, but, you know, again, like you kind of already been through one game with him. And that wasn't really the letdown at the tackle position. It was the other tackle position there.
That's right.
But thankfully, Michael, we have some good news to share. I know it doesn't, like, I know people don't even believe it. This is Florida State. We don't have good news. We actually have some good news to share. And it's funny because I shared this on social media and I got the same comment 500 times. Well, he doesn't have a quarterback to throw to him, so it doesn't matter. Guys, just let us be happy for 5 minutes.
Let us have a moment.
Let us have 5 minutes of happiness here. Hakeem Williams is going to be available. Mike Norvell said that he do expect him to be available this Saturday against Memphis. And man, to me, like I get the jokes with DJ. I totally understand that. That's fine. But this is only a net positive. There is no way you can not count this as a big win for Florida State because this is the guy that, first off, is a former 5-star, had a couple flashes last year, you know, that catch that he had against Syracuse. Mm-hmm. You know, this is a guy that can quite literally turn a 4-yard catch into a 40-yard touchdown. We saw it with our own eyes against Power 5 defenses. So I think this is going to be a spark, right? He not only that, but you look at where he was at last year compared to his body type this year when he came in, he looked in so much better shape, so much more ready to contribute. Now, Mike Norvell did say that he has some rust to shake off, but that's something that they have been working on in practice this week. But I think you get 2 things from this, right? I think you get one, a big body, high level receiver that when you look at Kentron Portier and what he was able to do in that BC game, maybe you get these 2 on the field at the same time or rotating together. That gives you a good option there as well. I mean, you got to hit them, but that gives you that option. And then also I think it gives you a boost in the running game too, because he's a big body physical guy. So that outside run blocking, which has been a problem so far, frankly, I think you get a boost there too. So I think this is 100% a net positive to get a guy like Hakeem Williams, because as we know, I mean, truthfully, he is probably the highest ceiling guy on paper on this roster at the receiver position. So getting him back is going to be huge.
Absolutely. Listen, to me, if he can catch that little oval thing called the football, if he can catch it and hold on to it, if he can not get whipped by his corner responsibility on the run game, net positive already. That's it. Like
exactly.
Net positive already.
Because we don't have a lot of that going on right now.
We don't have a lot of that going on right now. No, you're absolutely right. I mean, he's a big body guy. You saw him last year before he got injured. When he was in, man, he was a bulldog in the run game. I mean, he was blocking guys all the way into the bathroom. And so if he can set that example for those other receivers to say, hey, this is how we do this here at Florida State. This is how we play the wide receiver position. I think, again, that is a net positive, to use your word. That is a gain benefit for Florida State. And maybe the other wide receivers will then, step up to the plate. And so I'm excited to see him. I mean, we all assumed going into the spring and in summer and coming in the fall that he would be a big part of this offense. And unfortunately he's been injured, which has been some of his kind of MO. So hopefully he's kind of past that, and we'll be able to see a little bit of what he can bring to the table, and hopefully elevate this wide receiver room to a new standard.
Yeah, and I mean, really, at this point, this offense needs a spark any way they can get it. And so Hakeem may be that guy. And to me, I just think about, like, when you look back to that Syracuse game, that was like a 3-yard route, and he turned it into a 42-yard touchdown. Yep. So we actually did see in that Georgia Tech game, in that first game, where DJ was actually relatively accurate on the very short throws.
That's right.
So, like, man, and we know we have a problem right now with our skill guys that they just can't break tackles. They can't make yards after catch. So, like, if you can get that one guy who can possibly do that for you, it could be a spark for this offense. So I'm really
catch the ball.
Right. Well, it's got to be in the same hemisphere as him.
That's right.
But hopefully at 6'2" with a good catch radius, DJ can maybe overthrow him by 3 feet and he can go get it. So, of course, guys, we're just kidding. Right. I mean, it's true, but we're just kidding. But yeah, so I mean, it's a spark. So you're hoping that he can do something. So, man, I mean, at this point, you need anything. You got to get anything going. And so, yeah, man. And so when we go big picture here, talking about this, and just some of the things that are going into this week, like, I know we, on the last episode where we talked about a lot of the tough questions that had to be asked, like, guys, I mean, we don't think Mike Norvell should be fired. That's not something that we're saying.
Nope.
We do think that this team has an opportunity to get better. We do think that they can put some things together. We do think that he's still a good coach. There has kind of been a little bit of a misnomer about maybe some of the way things have been taken there. And I will say too, like, I think nowadays that in the NIL and the portal era, that, like, just saying that you can go out and get, air quotes, recruiters is maybe not as cut and dry as it sounds. There's a lot of factors that go into that. But again, I think the recruiting and the development side of things are very important. And there are some changes that need to be made to the staff at the end of the year. But we still think Mike Norvell can kind of get this ship righted. We've seen him take this program from really much lower lows than where we're at now, to much higher highs than we're obviously at now too. I think really right now, man, the catalyst is they just got to start winning games. And that's why this Memphis game is so important. I mean, obviously, and we're going to get into this on another episode. We don't really have time to go down this road right now, but obviously there was a second decommitment that came after the last episode that we recorded. And so, like, to me, you just got to stop the bleeding. You just have to get some wins. And so, man, that's your opportunity this Saturday to kind of get yourself up off the mat and get some positive momentum going. But yeah, I mean, I still like Mike Norvell. I'm not trying to run him off. It's just, I think there needs to be some changes to the staff, man. But it's a totally different world of college football that we're competing in nowadays. And that 247 article, if most of you are familiar with it, that came out, man, just goes to show you that, like, it's not the Bobby Bowden college football that we grew up with. It's just not, man. It's different. But I still think Mike Norvell can get this thing right.
Yeah, you're right. It's not your granddaddy's football, man. It's not the football you and I grew up and deeply fell in love with. I mean, we still love this team. We still love this program, but it's definitely not the same. And, Jesse, you're a paramedic in your everyday career. You're out there saving lives. So I'm going to use a medical term that I think you'll understand. And I think I'm using this word right. But when you come across a patient that's just bleeding out, you're trying to cauterize the room, cauterize the wound, right? Yep. You're trying to get that thing, plug it as best as you can, so that the blood will start clotting and stop bleeding out. And that's what Mike Norvell and this coaching staff have to do. They've got to cauterize this wound because it is festering right now. It is overflowing. Yeah. And if they don't stop it soon, that heart is going to stop. They're going to run out of blood. Sorry not to be disgusting to you guys, but just to give you guys this mental picture of like, Jesse and I fully believe in Mike Norvell. We've always believed in Mike Norvell. We think he's the best coach for Florida State right now. And we've never once, and will never once, unless it gets like really bad, call for his firing. Absolutely not. Do we think there needs to be staff changes regardless of how they finish the year? They could literally go and win the next 10 games, get into the playoff, win the national championship. We'd be so excited and still say they need to make staff changes at the end of the season, right? Yeah. Because it has become very clear and very evident that there are some staff who are not producing where they need to be, whether it's recruiting or development or both. And I think Mike realizes that. I think he's going to take care of that, and we trust him to do that. Can Florida State recover this season and make it a decent season? Absolutely. The question we're asking now is, how long is it going to take? Because Jesse, both you and I, we talked about this pre-show. It's like we actually see fixable areas, right? Where the offense can be fixed, where the defense can be fixed. At least, well, let me step back. The defensive line can be fixed. The cornerbacks haven't been tested yet, so we're still assuming they're going to be good. I don't really know about your linebackers, but whatever. I think your offensive line can be fixed. I think the offense as a whole can actually be schemed up in such a way that it actually accounts for your skill players not being as skilled as you thought they were. And I think the offense can be schemed in such a way that it actually covers up some of your deficiencies with your quarterback with DJU. And I know we're going to get into that in a moment, because I went back and watched the film for both games. And I think there are areas in which Florida State, which Mike Norvell can do that. So anyways, the thing I'm trying to say is that it is fixable to an extent. They can have a decent season. The question we're asking now is, how long is it going to take to do that?
Right. And when we say decent, obviously it's not going to be a championship or an ACC championship or even anything like that, but you can actually win a few games here. And you can, like you said, it's really about stopping the bleeding. Like we're laid out in the street right now, Michael. So we need someone to roll up on us with a tourniquet and stop this bleeding, man. Come on. Like that's what a Memphis win would be. It would be like putting a tourniquet on the bleeding. Right. Now, I don't know if there's enough paramedics in the world to save that linebacker room, but that's neither here nor there.
Now we might as well go read them their last rites, because that's pretty much done.
Yeah, I think Randy's already that obituary is already written. So, but yeah, I think with what you said, let's get into that part right now. Why? Because, man, again, like I talked about with that bye week, man, I think the bye week is good for the team. I think it's good for the fans, because I am coming into this with a little bit more positive attitude. We're cutting a few more jokes on this one, just to try and lighten the mood up a little bit, because you want to see them do better. And I think it's good for the team too. I think man, the hangover of that Georgia Tech game and the long travel and everything, and then the BC things are just piling up. So sometimes you just need some time to get out of your own head, and so I think for me, that bye week was huge, because like you talked about, there's so many fixable things here. Now there's some things that are not fixable. There's some things that you're just going to have to live. There's some warts you got to live with this season. It is what it is. But when you watch this team, to me, three of the really just absolute huge things that stand out, the biggest red flags on this team: lack of communication.
Yep.
And I think that is something that if you fix, you think about the wheel routes that we got ate up on with BC.
Gosh.
It's not that we didn't see it. We just didn't communicate it well, and we didn't pass the people off to the defenders right.
That's right.
And so, like, if we had just passed guys off, if we communicated well, I think you stop a lot of that stuff. Two, we can't catch the ball, man. That's something you got to figure out. And I'm hoping in the bye week, we know that FSU went back to working on fundamentals and working on themselves this bye week. If that's something that you can clean up as well, and also you get Hakeem back, so maybe that's a boost in your receiver room there. And then tackling. The tackling has really just been atrocious. And so, like, I think, they talked about this week, Adam Fuller and them, where, like, a lot of teams don't tackle in practice anymore because of fear of injury. And, sometimes I wish they would, at least like one day a week. But there's tackling concepts that they can work on, and that's something that they did. So, like, man, if you could do nothing else but clean up communication, catch the freaking ball. Because I know we got a quarterback problem, guys. I'm not hiding from that. We're going to talk about that part too. But you got to help him out somewhat.
Right,
You got to have
right.
somewhat of a run game. You got to block to help him out, to get a run game, to help your quarterback out. And then you got to tackle when you get the opportunity on defense, when you do communicate those things right, because the tackling has frankly been atrocious. They've also talked about working on pad level this week, which is something that we talked about. We're like, the defensive line maybe isn't playing great. We know Odell's not coaching him to come off the line and stand straight up and get pushed back 2 or 3 yards. We know they're not. Right. So, like, if you can just get some of those things corrected, I think you can see the opportunity for this team to get better. And that's a lot of the stuff that they worked on this week. Now, again, like when you talk about the quarterback situation, and I know you have some thoughts on DJ, but for me, it's like, man, he is struggling in his own right? The Ja'Kai throw in the Georgia Tech game is inexcusable. The 3 goal line throws that you had against Boston College, where you missed every single one of them that were, a peewee quarterback could probably complete those. Those are inexcusable. There's no way around it. And I'm not here to defend DJ from that.
Yeah.
But what I am saying is that you got to help him out. You got to catch the ball when it's thrown on target, because they dropped 25% of his passes in that game. And that's not good for your offense, and that's not good for his psyche as well. And I also think, like, it's going to be my biggest interest in this game is going to be because I know a lot of people are so disappointed that DJ's starting.
Yeah.
There was a 0% chance I expected anybody else to start.
Correct.
Mike Norvell is not going to coach his team based on what we want, what Michael wants, what the fan base wants. He's just not going to do it. I will be interested to see if he struggles again, if Brock Glenn comes in, if Brock Glenn at least gets some packages. I will be interested to see, because, man, I will say this, and then I'll kick it to you, but, like, I think if you go into this game and DJ struggles again and you don't even see Brock, I think you lose the fan base completely. I think everybody loses faith in you for not pulling the trigger and at least seeing what he's got. So I think you might see some packages for him. But, man, it was never a question to me whether DJ was going to start or not. Now, whether that's the right decision, we don't know. We don't get paid $10 million to make that decision.
That's right.
There has always been the reports that he is better in practice. But, again, it don't mean squat what you do in practice. It means what you do under the lights on Saturday. So I'm not surprised that he's starting. But if he's going to be in there, the guys around him got to help. This is a team sport.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, when I went back and watched both the Georgia Tech and the Boston College game, there were 7 things that I wrote down, like, okay, and 4 of them were offensive and 3 of them were defensive. And you've already communicated a couple of them. So I'm sorry if this is like a repeat for you guys watching and listening. But on offense, I think number 1 was scheme. Jesse, I was telling you this in the pre-show, is I think Mike Norvell actually had the right game plan. Now, going back in hindsight, right? That's why the bye week was good for fans.
Yeah.
Go back and watch the film. I think the scheme for Georgia Tech was 75% there, right? I think Mike Norvell could have taken a couple more shots, or he probably, because there's some argument, not everybody knows the play calls. There's some argument that he did call more shots, but DJ checked him out of that. So.
And we also missed a lot of those too.
And we also missed a lot of those.
Yeah,
right. Exactly. So whether Mike could have called more or DJ should have stayed in those shots, whatever. So I'd say the game plan was 75% correct. Here's why I say that. Because if you go back and watch the film, if you go back and watch Mike Norvell during the summer when they were recruiting DJ, they talked about I think they watched 3 different tapes of DJ, both good, bad, and in between. And what they saw was the game plan for DJ. And I know, DJ, if you end up watching this, awesome. Hey, man, good job. Do better. Love you, mean it. But I don't mean this offensively, DJ, but, as I was saying to you, Jesse, that back in the early 2000s, they used to have this moniker for quarterbacks. They called them game managers, right? These were the kind of quarterbacks that, like, they weren't the Tom Brady's, they weren't the Peyton Mannings. They were more like, Kirk Cousins or Matt Ryan. They're not going to go and put the game on their back and win you all those games, but they're not going to do stuff to lose you the game, right? And DJ, at his best, at Oregon State, at Clemson, was the kind of quarterback that wasn't going to win you games, but he definitely wasn't going to lose you games. When they called the offensive scheme and play calling around that. DJ can be a great game manager. And I know that's a term quarterbacks hate to hear, but the scheme for Georgia Tech was to literally put DJ in that role, to be a game manager, to not lose you the game, but to make just enough plays, because Mike believed that they could run. They could be a great run team, right? Yeah. And so I actually think that, and this is where I will say, and I mean this in the most loving way, Coach Norvell, this is where I thought Mike panicked. I think Mike panicked after that Georgia Tech game and decided, okay, we've got to air it out a lot more, right? And now you put the onus on DJ to win you the game. Basically what it was, right? Yeah. I think they had 21 rushing yards against Boston College, if I remember that correctly. Yes. 21, guys. 21, okay? And so they put the onus on DJ, and you saw he threw 42 passes, and he was throwing passes all the way down to lot 14 for trying to connect with them. I don't know who he thought was going to catch the balls there, but he was throwing wide receivers completely not even in the United States. Like he was missing receivers right and left, because you were trying to win the game on his arm, and that's not what he does best. Right. I mean, you go back and watch the Clemson film. He does not do that when you're having him do that. And so I think that if Mike Norvell will go back to the scheme he built with Georgia Tech, where it's a lot of short passing, where it's a lot more run game, where he's putting his playmakers in different spaces. I remember thinking in a Georgia Tech game, he could use a lot more screens right now, because that Georgia Tech is pinning their ears. They're just coming back. Man, screen them to death. Run some jet sweep passes where, that little pop pass with the wide receiver, the running back coming across, right? And so that's number one. I think the offensive scheme could be fixed. Number two is that DJU is a game manager. I think if you put him in the game manager situation, he's going to regain his confidence. Like you said, I think he lost a lot of confidence in himself as that Boston College game kept going and going and going. It was just not good. I think the way you build this offense is you try to run the ball, short throws. Those are the two combinations. Yeah. And you're running the ball, and short throws leads you to maybe taking about 4 or 5 shots per half. Okay. Yeah. Hear me. I didn't say per game. 4 or 5 shots per half, because you've got to keep those safeties and you've got to keep those linebackers honest, right? The corners are going to do what they're going to do, but you've got to keep those safeties and linebacker honest. So play action, running the ball, run play action if you're going to run the ball. Run play action if you're going to throw short passes too, because you've got to get those safeties honest, right? And then I think the offensive line, absolutely. There were so many plays, especially against Boston College, where they run counter, and literally like the center or the guard's job was to get over to get that tackle or that DN coming off, and they just whiff. Yeah. That's not for a lack of skill. That's a lack of effort. That's a lack of not having the cojones to I'm going to go get that man and knock him the heck out of here. Right. Yeah. And so I think with the offensive line, I was really worried, are they really just this bad? Robert Scott is just that bad. I'm sorry, brother. Just got to call it out. But everybody else, I really think it was just like a lack of effort. So if they can continue, and I don't know if that's Alex Atkins coming back or what that's going to be, but if they can actually get those effort there, I really think this offense can get better. Now on defense, like you said, man, the biggest number one thing is communication. Man, like you said, I don't know how many rail routes Boston College and Georgia Tech ran on us, but they should have blown us out by a lot more. Because those rail routes were open they were more open than McDonald's is on a 24-hour deal. They were so wide open. So communication is super big. Like you said, number 2 is tackling. The third thing I found was run fits. Yeah. Which goes to communication. But even then, they get communicated very well. Shaheem or somebody would say, hey, you got to get that gap. You got to get that gap. And then the play would start and we would just lose our freaking minds and run way out of the play and leave a wide open cutback lane for the running backs to get through. What are we doing? I mean, Trayshawn Ward was like, this must be the Atlantic Ocean right here. This is ridiculous. And so for me, those 7 things, if Florida State can do those, if they can begin to fix those, I think this can turn around the team. Again, the question is, how long is it going to take to fix this? Did the bye week help? Did we take a positive step towards that against Memphis? We're going to see.
Yeah, and I think when you look at DJ, it's like you don't want him to throw the ball 42 times a game. No. That is not a recipe for success. I think the problem right now, and I actually just went and looked it up while you were laying those out. He's only thrown the ball over 40 times one time in the last 2 years. Typically, he's a 25 to 30 time a game.
Right.
I think the one time that he threw over 41 yards was a double overtime win over Wake Forest. So again, double overtime. So
correct.
Like, you don't want the game on his arm. You just don't. Right. But I think they've been searching for an identity the first 2 weeks where it's like in the Georgia Tech game, you couldn't really throw it. So you kept trying to run and run and run and run. And then in the Boston College game, you couldn't run it. So you kept trying to throw and throw and throw. And neither one of them worked. So I think you need to find an identity without abandoning the other half of what you're trying to do.
Right.
And I also think a lot of things just stacked up in you against you. I mean, when you look at that first game, you know, the offensive line was just sloppy and guys couldn't get separation. But then in the BC game, I mean, again, a lot of that does fall on DJ, but you had 25% drop passes. You also had Darius Washington, who is typically a good offensive tackle, got smoked in that game. And so, like, you're hoping that everything just snowballed on you, man. And it looked so much worse. Now, the defense, again, has a lot to clean up. But like you said, man, there's a perfect example of that Trayshawn Ward cutback play where it's like, the defensive line, actually, they're not a dominant group, right? They're not what they were last year. It is what it is. We have to learn to accept that. But they're not terrible. They're actually not playing that bad. They're actually in position a lot. Now, like, I mean, even if you look at some of it, it's tackling. Like, they're in position, they just miss tackling. They're also playing different with mobile quarterbacks. But, like,
that's right.
The perfect example was the play that I had even sent you, like, while you were on vacation. I was like, man, am I right here? Because this just looks wrong. Like, you had 75-80% of the defense do the right thing, but then Cam Riley gets sucked into a bad run fit because he bid on a play fake that he wasn't supposed to. Left a huge cutback lane. Everybody else did everything right. Had Shaheem took away the quarterback option, had he have been there to stop that, the play doesn't go for 15 yards. Done. And even then, the play only went for 10, and then Conrad Hussey made a piss poor tackle attempt, and it went for 15 yards. Correct. So, like, it's just comes back to everybody has to do their job, or else you can have 85% of the defense do the right thing, 15% do the wrong thing, and it turns into an explosive play.
Yeah, absolutely. There was one play. I want to give you one more example of this. There's one play against Boston College where one of the few times that you couldn't blame the linebackers on this play. The linebackers are in the right fit, but the tackle comes off and blocks Pat Payton into oblivion. And Pat Payton is not even trying. He's just letting himself get blocked. Like, was that the design? Was he supposed to be passive on that play? I don't know about you, Jesse, but there's never a time where I need and I know you're trying to play against sometimes when you're playing a mobile quarterback, what you do what is called a mush rush. You're rushing, but you're really trying to keep that the edge there. I don't think that's a mush rush. That literally is, you got whipped on that play and you didn't even give any effort in that. If he was actually where he was supposed to be, that would have been a 1 to 2 yard loss. But because he wasn't there, now you force the linebacker down when the linebacker's not supposed to be there. So the linebacker becomes the first level instead of the second level. And so the running back gets past him and there's no one in the second level. So he picks up 15 yards until the safety can get to him.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I mean, there's so many things. Like, it's just a combination of things that you have to get cleaned up. And that's what we're hoping for the bye week, that they at least got some of that stuff cleaned up. And I will say that, like, one of the things that at least has me encouraged this week, and I will say, like, man, some of these clips that they post from practice, I just wish they would keep it to themselves. But like the sprinting races now, the effort isn't great. You know, there's a lot of guys jogging and stuff, and that's the type of stuff that worries me. But man, when I read the practice reports before that BC game, like, I almost contemplated canceling my trip because I had a pit in my stomach that, like, man, we're going to lose, because I think the hangover from that Georgia Tech loss, because they didn't expect to lose that game.
Yeah.
I think that game beat them twice. And I was like, man, when the coaches are having to force the energy and all that type of stuff, that makes you feel really, really bad about it. But the practice reports have been better this week. Mike Norvell seems more himself now. There seems to be a little bit more energy in practice. So I do feel a little bit better about that. You've also seen the quarterbacks and the wide receivers. Mike Norvell commented on that today about them meeting on their own to work on timing and chemistry. I mean, it's a little late, but I mean, thank goodness that it's at least happening, because it's something that has to happen. Like, at least these guys are identifying that this is a problem and they're trying to go fix it. Now, is that going to, I mean, you've had all summer to do this. So do I think a week of doing it is all of a sudden going to fix our passing game? No, but it sometimes, like we always say, small changes can lead to big improvements.
That's right.
But I know we got to get into Memphis, but I think a couple of the other things too that make me feel better about this week, and this is something that Mike Norvell actually talked about in his press conference too, is this is actually like your first normal game week.
That's
like
right.
You had the first one was in Ireland. You had a new defensive coordinator. The second one was a Monday night game. You had an entirely new staff with no film to prepare with. Now you actually have a Saturday game at home, and you have tape to watch from the first two games.
Right.
So like you feel like it's a bit more of a normal game plan. So that is something I think that should help in their advantage as well, because they haven't had that so far this season. Right. Now, I will say that this is the first road game for Memphis, so there's something that kind of a curveball for them. This is also the first noon game for Florida State. So you do worry about, to me, I do worry about, like, Memphis comes in here, G5 opponent, it's at noon. Let's be honest, man, the crowd may or may not be good or not. It's going to be hot. Like, look, man, I'm dropping my ticket prices like a diss track. You know what I'm saying? I'm waiting. Someone buy this thing already, because it's like I worry about that. So I worry about like a slow start, and if they let them come out here and kind of, if they let Memphis dictate terms to them, because Memphis is going to be hungry. They see blood in the water like every other team.
Oh yeah.
If they feel like they can jump on you and get out by a couple scores and kind of kill your will, you could be in trouble. So I think Florida State has to get out to a fast start. And so those are some of the things that I'm really looking at as we transition into talking about this Memphis game. But before we do that, let me bring you a quick word from one of today's sponsors, and that is our friends over at the Autograph app. And look, these guys have all the content you want for your sports teams: podcasts, YouTube videos, articles. And guess what? If the college team has you down in the dumps, you can also follow NFL, NBA, MLB, WNBA, NHL. They got all the type of stuff that you want over there. So it's perfectly free. They just rolled out a bunch of new features, so make sure you check that out. It's the Autograph app, available on iPhone and Android, and I will link it below to make it easy for you guys to go grab that. So let's get into this Memphis game, Michael. Florida State comes into this one, as we know, 0-2. Memphis is 2-0, ranked number 25 in the coaches poll. So you got, I know these are the rankings that don't really matter yet, but this is, by all intents and purposes, this is one of the best teams that you played so far. We do know, of course, the history that this is Mike Norvell's old team. Ryan Silverfield, the head coach there, is Mike Norvell's old offensive line coach. He is in year 5 there, done very well, 33-18 record so far. This is the first time that these teams have met since 1990, so it's been a really long time. And I know there's going to be the fun talk, between just his old program and I'm sure they're going to meet and talk, before the game and stuff like that. So there's going to be that part too. But it's going to be all business when the ball kicks off, because they're going to want to win this game as much as Florida State's going to want to win this game too. And so when you look back at Memphis again, man, this is a really good team. They were 10-3 last year, 6-2 in the conference now. The thing with Memphis, and we're going to get into this a little bit deeper into this matchup, but when you look at what they did last year, they were 10-3, but their strength of schedule was only 95th. So it wasn't a very hard schedule. And, there's always that big difference between a G5 team playing a G5 schedule and then when they step up to that Power 5 team. It's just a big difference. So we talk about that a lot with SMU. Last year, they did have the 6th ranked scoring offense at 39.4 points per game. Guess what they're averaging this year? 39 points a game. So they are right on pace for what they were doing last year. But I will say that when you look at last year, that scoring offense, they did face 3 top 25 defenses, and that number dropped down to 27.3. So again, they faced 5 defenses that were ranked outside of the top 100 and scored 46.2 points per game on average. So again, like, sometimes these stats can be a little bit deceiving when you play better competition. Now, last year, their defense was atrocious. 28.8 points per game allowed, 95th in the country. They faced only one top 25 offense, and they gave up 38 points. They faced 3 ranked 100th or below, and they gave up 27.6. So their final F+ rankings, which are adjusted for opponent and pace of play and things like that, they were ranked 53rd last year. Offense was 18th. Defense was 109th. So they are very, very much a offensive-led team. Now, again, like we talked about, 39 points per game so far this year, 8.5 points per game allowed. So it looks a little bit better. They do have a new defensive coordinator. But when you talk about Memphis in 2024, it really, and we're going to get into their first two games, it's a lot of who they played. They just have not played. They have not had a challenge yet. So, I mean, even with Florida State being 0-2, this is by far going to be the biggest challenge that they're going to face so far this season. They are projected to win 9.5 games this year. So there is high hopes for Memphis this year. They did bring back 69% of their production, 74% on offense, 65 on defense. And they have 124 combined O-line starts. So they do have experience on this team. Now, I know this has not worked out in any of the first 3 games, but I'm going to keep saying it until it does. You have such a talent edge in this game, regardless of what you're getting out of that talent. Florida State in the 247 composite is 13th. Georgia Tech was 46th. BC was 58th. Memphis is down at 72nd. So, again, you have a massive talent edge. And when I watched that game against Troy, it just doesn't look the same, man. It just does not look the same as what you're seeing out here in a Power 5 game. That doesn't mean they can't come in here and beat you, because the last 2 teams you had a big talent edge did, but it's a different level. And so we're going to get into more some of the matchups, man. Yeah, I'm thinking that when you look at this team, this is a team that is very well coached.
Yeah.
You know, and they are familiar. Mike Norvell and Ryan Silverfield are familiar with each other. Now, we were talking before the show. I think the advantage probably goes to Memphis on this one, because Mike Norvell is probably running more of the same offense that he did at Memphis when he was with Ryan Silverfield, rather than Ryan Silverfield is running because he has an offensive coordinator.
Right.
So I think the advantage is probably going to play a little bit there for Memphis. But yeah, man, I think these are 2 teams that are familiar with each other. I think I could see it going either way, though.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, like I was telling you off pre-show, is that Ryan Silverfield and Mike Norvell are really good friends. They're really close. They talk throughout the year all the time. Obviously, they're probably not talking as much this week.
Yeah.
But
talking some trash, maybe.
Some trash, yeah. And but yeah, so I think Ryan's coming in with a lot of confidence. You know, in his pre-game press conference, he talked about how they're going to come out swinging, because they are. It's so funny, as I was listening to or reading his presser, I kept thinking, gosh, they sound like the hunter.
Yeah,
that's what Florida State's supposed to sound like.
Yeah,
but we don't even sound like the hunted. We sound like prey right now.
Yeah,
you know, but they sound like the hunter. Like he talked he's like, no, we're coming out swinging. He's like, yeah, Florida State is talented, and we gotta, we can. He made a reference to the Notre Dame versus Northern Illinois game. He's like, if you don't come out, if you let your game down, you can see what happens there. They think they can come in and beat Florida State. They're I got the impression that Memphis is very confident that they're going to come in. Like we talked about, they see the dude laying on the side of the street. They're like, I'm about to jack his wallet right now. Like he can't do anything. And so I think that it is going to require Florida State to have to come out and literally punch them in the mouth. Now, I know some of you skeptics out there are saying, well, we did that to Georgia Tech, and then they beat us up and took our lunch. You're right. I think Florida State's going to have to come out and punch them so hard in the mouth, meaning, man, it'd be nice if they could score on their first 3 drives and just take Memphis completely out of it very quickly. Because you're right, Jesse, as I was watching the tape, I mean, there was nothing about, maybe their offensive line gave me a little concern, but there was nothing about their skill players, their quarterback, their defensive scheme, the defensive players that gave me oh gosh, this is not going to be good. The only thing I think that can prevent Florida State from winning this game and in some ways winning decisively is Florida State.
Yeah. I wholeheartedly agree with that, man. And that's why, you have to be like, man, you have to have pride in this one. Like, this is my house. We are the better team. We are supposed to win this game, and you can't let them bring the game to you. Now, it's probably going to be close either way. And that's what Vegas thinks too. Florida State is a 6.5 point favorite with an over under of 52.5 points in this one. Looking at the money on this game, as far as wild. Yeah, it's crazy, man. As far as the spread goes, 57% of the bets are on Memphis to win or to cover the spread. 53% of the money is on Memphis. Now, when you talk about just to straight up win the game, 78% of the bets are on Florida State, but 87% of the money is on Memphis to win this game. And, I said it against the Boston College game, and I was wrong, so I hope I'm wrong on this one. They say follow the money.
That's right.
And so, like, we're gonna see, man. It does, like I said, man. It just makes you concerned. There's that much confidence among the bettors that Memphis. I think they, again, like you said, man. I think they see Florida State just kind of laid out on the side of the street, and they're just waiting to see something. We talked about that in the last episode.
Yep.
We're all in a wait and see one. So, like, just you got to see it from this team. You believe that they can get better, but you got to see it.
I hate to do a Willie Taggart thing because that was terrible, but do something.
Do something. I almost tweeted that out the other day. I was like, is it time to dust off to do something?
Right?
Do anything.
Do anything.
Do anything. Like that meme they have where like the guy's poking the thing with the stick. Like just do something, man.
Exactly.
Now I have seen a couple of implied scores here, just basically computer models.
Right.
That one of them had Florida State winning 30-23. So that's barely covering. That's covering the spread there. That's probably you're more likely. The other one I saw was 39-22. Now that would be great. Feels a little generous. Even when you look at like the ESPN matchup predictor, it is at 73% FSU. I don't know about that. Another one that I saw was at 89%. Like they must have not watched the first two games, so we'll give them that.
They were like me; they were dreaming.
Exactly, but wake up because I don't know about that. But let's get into this Memphis team now. Let's talk about what they've done in 2024 and. So the good thing about this is now that we're far enough into the season, we actually have actual games to go talk about. So the first thing I want to give a tip of my hat to Memphis here because they blew out North Alabama. Screw those guys for what they did last year.
How dare you bring their name up?
Exactly. But they blew them out 40-0. Now, here's the thing. North Alabama is 0-3 right now as an FCS team. Memphis was a 38.5-point favorite. They won by 40. They did exactly what they were supposed to do in that one. They put up 367 yards. But when I went back and looked it up, they're 0-3. They played Memphis and two other FCS teams. Both of those FCS teams, the other ones, put up more yards than Memphis did against them. One of them actually put up 491 yards. Oof. Memphis put up 367. They had a good game passing, 22 of 30, 308 yards, 2 touchdowns, no picks. Now, this is what really stood out to me here, Michael. 59 yards on the ground by Memphis, only 2.3 yards per carry against that UNA team. And, they gave up UNA when I went back and looked it up. They gave up 176 yards to one of the FCS teams on the ground and 338 yards rushing in one of the other games. So the fact that Memphis only put up 59 yards, I almost want to go back and watch that to even see how that even happened.
Right.
Now, they did do good on defense, of course. They held them to only 185 yards, 118 yards passing, 2 interceptions, and only gave up 67 yards, 2.2 yards per carry. Now, they did actually gain 136. They had 46 negative yards. So, man, they must have had some big kind of splash plays there.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, really, the thing is they did what they were supposed to against a really, really bad FCS team in that game. But the 2.3 yards per carry was kind of an alarming stat there. Now, of course, they did rebound and rush for over 200 in that Troy game, and we'll talk about that next. But, yeah, man, that's one that's a stat that really stood out to me from that North Alabama game.
Yeah, I watched a little bit of that, and I was curious. Is like was it the game planning? Like it didn't seem like they called. Like it almost seemed like they abandoned the run a little bit, and they were just gonna like chuck it around the field because they felt like they could just do that. So I just wonder if maybe they just tried to stay away from the run game as much because, as you said, and we'll talk about it in a second, is in the Troy game they really did run the ball. I mean they. Yeah. Ran over for 200 yards in that game. So I just wonder if maybe in that UNA game they were just like, let's not beat up our guys. We're going to try to run in here, and if not, we'll just keep chucking it, and we know we're going to walk out with a win anyway. So yeah, they had the same confidence that Mike Norvell had against Georgia Tech, except they guessed wrong on that one. But and so I just that's kind of what I think happened is that they just didn't they built the game plan that was very basic and vanilla.
Yeah, it's just still crazy to say. I mean, even when we played Duquesne back in the day, and we ran for 400 yards in that game.
Yes, so we did.
It at least makes you go, wow, really? But then you look at game 2. This is a somewhat better test. Now, here's the thing about Troy, right? They whooped Troy 38-17. I get all that. Now, Troy actually is the back-to-back Sun Belt champ.
That's right.
But I was watching that game and taking some notes on it, and this is a totally different story. There's a lot of context that has to be provided to that. First off, Troy is 0-2.
Yep.
They lost to Nevada in the first game, which they should not have. Memphis was a 19.5-point favorite, won by 21. So again, they did what they were expected to do. They put up 372 yards in that one. The passing game really struggled in that one. 20
Yes,
of 30, only 161 yards, only one touchdown through the air. And again, this is a pass heavy team. This is the heart of their offense, their quarterback. And we'll talk about him in a little bit. But they did run for over 200 yards, 211 yards, 7.3 yards per carry. Now, here's a couple of notes that I think have to be qualified with that Troy game. First off, Troy was 129th in returning production this year. They lost a lot, like a school record passer and rusher. They also lost their starting quarterback in the second quarter of that game, very early in there.
That's right.
And basically, once the other guy came in, their offense went from bad to terrible. They were also without their starting center in that game, and they also lost their starting running back for the first half of that game, which is kind of crazy because apparently he got a targeting, because I was like, how's he out for a penalty? He got a targeting call on like an onside kick.
Yeah.
So they were already rebuilding and down a couple of very key starters there too. Now, when you look at that 211 yards, now granted, you got to stop the big plays. That's part of the offense. 117 of those yards came on 5 runs, and they were all 20-plus runs. So it was more chunk plays than them just moving the ball, keeping the chains going. So, I mean, Florida State's got to do that too. We've not shown the ability to stop the run, but you got to stop the chunk plays. But a lot of that, again, the stats can be somewhat deceiving.
Yeah.
They did hold Troy down to 251 yards, so they didn't do a whole lot on offense there. There was also, there was like 2 PI calls in the end zone. Troy got absolutely hosed on a fumble call that gave Memphis the ball on the 25. That was ridiculous. They didn't even review it. And something that did stand out to me there was that they allowed a few pressures on that game on Hennigan. Now, he wasn't very highly pressured in there. I got some numbers later on, but he almost got his block rocked by some of the pressures. I mean, unblocked guys coming in, and they almost got him blasted.
Yeah.
But again, back to that where they gave up 211 yards against Troy, or Troy gave up 211 yards against them. Troy gave up 214 rushing yards to Nevada, 6.3 yards a carry. So they are like 121st in rush defense right now. So again, while they're exposing the weaknesses that are there to be exposed, they're doing what they're supposed to do against bad teams. And I think that's the biggest takeaway. So when you look at the scores and you go, okay, 40-0 against Northern Alabama, and then 38-17 against Troy.
Right.
Like, these are 2 bad teams, and they did exactly what they were expected to do in those games.
That's right. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, like you said, I think the biggest thing I took away was like that they were able to get those, over 200 yards because they had those 5 like really, really big plays.
Yeah.
And the thing I kept thinking is, okay, so really it wasn't like that bad. They ran 29 times, got 211 yards. But then I kept thinking back, well, but those are the kind of plays Florida State's been giving up.
Yeah, exactly.
So I don't know if I feel better about that.
Right,
Like those are the plays Florida State's been giving up. Like, we'll get a stop and then we'll give up a 40-yard run. We'll get a stop and then we'll give up a 20-yard run. We'll get a stop and we give a 50-yard run. And so that's, and I imagine that if I didn't see a lot of motion, I didn't see a lot of trying to confuse the defense. Jesse, I bet you
see it in this one.
I bet you my next paycheck, you're going to see a ton of motion. You're going to see a ton of eye candy to try to get those on, because that's the blueprint, right? That's the blueprint that Georgia Tech laid out, right? And you didn't think, Bill O'Brien and when he was at Alabama, he used some motion, but it wasn't a lot. But he used a ton of motion against Florida State in that game against Boston College. I guarantee you, again, you're going to see a lot of that. And so Florida State, again, it's going to be tested. Can we get in the right run fits? Can we communicate? Can we pass things off correctly? Because Memphis is going to try to run that ball at us, and they're going to try to hit us over the top. I mean, Seth he's not a game-changing quarterback, but that dude can hit someone if you let him.
He's good. Yeah, he's good. And I had some notes on that too, as we get into the offensive. They didn't use a lot of motion in there, but I bet you see that come this week. Now, just looking at a couple of stats just to kind of paint where both teams are at going through the first 2 weeks here. Again, like I mentioned with the F+ rankings, these are FEI plus S&P plus rankings combined that are opponent adjusted and pace of play. So Florida State currently is sitting at 33rd, offense 47th, defense 30th. I don't know what they got. Their computer must have a virus. Memphis is at 30th, offense at 9th, defense at 87th. So again, we'll see how it goes with. I mean, sometimes the stats maybe don't tell the whole story. That I was a little surprised on, but your yards per play margin, which is your offense versus defense, your yards per play margin there. Florida State is at 105th. That's not good. Memphis is at 20th. We're negative. They're actually positive 2.94. EPA per play, which is expected points added. Florida State is 121st. Memphis is at 19th. So these stats are not telling a great story. Net success rate, you are at negative 7.5%, 117th in the country. Memphis is at plus 12.9%, 32nd in the country. Net points per drive, Memphis is positive at 1.4, which is 26th in the country. We are at negative 1.4, which is 103rd in the country. So the stats on paper tell you that Florida State should lose this game, that Memphis should come in here and win. But again, a lot of that has to do with the opponents that they've been playing.
That's right.
Now, as we talk about this Memphis offense, Michael, here's one thing that scares me the most about this team, right? Florida State, we know, has struggled to score points. They just have. Memphis has scored 20-plus points in 29 consecutive games, which is the longest streak in FBS. And Florida State right now is allowing 26 points per game. So in 29 games, and there have been some Power 5 teams in there. I think there's Mississippi State in there. There's Iowa State in there. There's been some Power 5 teams. They're putting up on you pretty much need to expect them to get to 20 points.
Yep.
Which means you need Florida State to score more than 20 points to win this game, which makes you a little nervous, but that defense is not super great. So looking at the Memphis offense versus the Florida State defense on EPA metrics per play, the Memphis offense is at 35th. Florida State is at 119th. So again, it's very lopsided. Success rate here, 36 to 115th. So again, it's just not been that great. Now, on your third and fourth down success rate, they are 37th in the country at 44.4%. Florida State is at 58.3%, which is 128th. So, man, there's not a whole lot of good stats to share for Florida State.
I thought we were being positive today.
We're trying, but this is the part that's going to drag it down a little bit. Now, when you look at explosive plays versus explosive plays allowed, Memphis has charted 14 plays of over 20 yards so far. Now, we know a lot of those came in that against weak competition. Florida State has allowed 8. Red zone scoring, Memphis is 100% on their red zone trips. 11 of 11, 8 touchdowns, 3 field goals. This is where Florida State has got to get better, point blank, period. They have allowed teams to score on 7 of 8 trips, 87.5%, but it's been 7 touchdowns, 0 field goals. You have got to stop giving up 7 points every time a team gets in the red zone. Right. So talking about this Memphis offense, it is a pro-style offense. They like to use these tight ends. It's very shotgun heavy. And one thing I will say about Hennigan, like, he's a good quarterback, but man, he is smart. He is a veteran. You can tell he will take what he can get. He is not afraid to hit that check down. He is not afraid to just dump it off and get 4 or 5 yards, move the chains, and do what he's got to do to get the ball going down the field. They will have long drives on you because he is not greedy. They, like you mentioned, one of the notes that I have, they didn't use a ton of motion, but I suspect they're going to see that. We're going to see more of that this week against Florida State. Now, one thing to note about that offense, Memphis running back Sutton Smith, which was one of their top 2 guys, he is out for the season with a knee injury. Now, again, like I mentioned earlier, they do return 74% of their offense, which is production from last year, which is led by quarterback Seth Hennigan. And again, this guy is good, man. He's 21 years old. He's been the starter for 3 seasons. This is his 4th year starting. He's eclipsed the 3,000 yard mark in every single season that he started for them. And, it's rare, man. You don't see 4-year starters very often. And I mean, this guy has been good. He's thrown for over 3,000 yards every single year. Last year was his best year. He threw for 3,800 yards, 32 touchdowns with a 66.7 completion percentage. So he's very efficient as well. Now, one thing that I did notice, too, at the quarterback position is, like, they will take shots. I mean, they will. But they don't do it a lot. I mean, when you look last year, over 60% of his passes were for 9 yards or less. 41.7% were in the 0 to 9 yard range. It's the same metrics going in 2024 so far. 60% of his passes this season are for 9 yards or less, and 40% are in that 0 to 9 range. Now, when you look at the deep shots here, they did air it out, but they struggle.
Yeah.
They, on the season, they are 3 of 10 on passes 10 yards or more. And they are 1 for 4 on passes of 20 yards or more. So they've taken some shots, but man, they've not been very successful at hitting them. And then the last thing I have on Hennigan here is he will run the ball, but he's not that fast. He is not Thomas Castellanos. He is not the other kid, Haynes King. And I will say that like he did run the ball 94 times last year. He does have 6 attempts for 24 yards this year, but 20 yards of that was on 1 carry. Right. And then the last thing on the quarterbacks, and I'll throw it back to you, is if Hennigan were to miss any time, their backups have 0 snaps of experience, literally 0. So he has to be in the game and available.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he's a smart kid, and their whole offense is dependent upon him being the trigger man, making the right checks at the line, getting them out of the bad plays, getting them into more of a if they need to go a short passing game, and like you said, they will take some shots. They're not really efficient at that. They're going to run a lot of bunch sets where they bring in a lot of 12 personnel, so that's 2 tight ends, 1 running back. They're going to bunch the wide receivers, and they're going to make you man up on them. They're going to make you man up, like come at them and attack them, and if you don't, they will try to bulldoze you off the line to run the ball. They run a lot of zone, of course, because Ryan Silverfield is a former offensive line coach. So their offensive line, I saw a lot of zone scheme running, meaning that the lineman will go to a spot, and whatever man's there, that's who they're going to block. And so, and they're pretty, they're in that Troy game. They were able to run the ball, somewhat decently well. They were able to have 5 big explosive plays in the run game as well. And, he's accurate. He's not going to make a lot of mistakes on you. He doesn't have any interceptions this year. He's a pretty smart guy. And so you're going to have to force Memphis to make a mistake, because they're not going to beat themselves. You're going to have to force it. You're going to have to be aggressive. I'm curious to see how Adam Fuller designs the defense for this game. Like, is he going to be on the attack? Are we going to blitz a little bit more? Are we going to bring the safety down in the box and go, maybe safety high, cover 3, where the corners are playing deep. You got a safety back. You're going to bring that safety down in the box just to, and maybe in some ways protect yourself against what you might assume is going to happen, which is a bad run fit here or there. At least now you have that extra man down in the box to cover up for that mistake if it does happen. So I'm curious to see how they're going to attack him. If they put the corners on the island and say, hey, let's force this guy to beat us with his arm, because we cannot give up the run game. Because if we allow them to run the ball with some consistency and they want to stay in it, then they basically have the field open to the playbook. If you go back and look at that Boston College game, Jesse, Florida State was able to get Boston College in a bunch of 3rd downs. The problem was they were 3rd and 2, 3rd and 3, 3rd and 1. And when you're playing with that, you ask any offensive coach, when it's 3rd and 4 and less, the playbook is wide open. But when it's 3rd and 6, 3rd and 7, 3rd and long, the playbook shrinks like a lot, right? And so Florida State, if they can get Memphis into those 3rd downs, but 3rd and 6 and more, then I think they will have I think they can have better success against them. And that'll be really dependent upon how Adam Fuller calls the game. But not just that. Does the defense show up with an attitude? Like, hey, we are Florida freaking State. We should not be walking to this game scared.
Yeah, and I think the one reason that I like this game better than the last 2 games is that I think you just match up better. Like, I think it's, you're not going with that really, really run heavy team. Now you have to prove you can stop the run, because we just said that they can run the ball, and their running back's pretty good. And we're going to talk about him in just a second, but like, they can run the ball. But this is one of those where you still feel like the secondary for this team has not been tested. But a lot of these guys are proven, and you feel like your pass defense still is the strength of this defense. And this is one where they are going to try and throw the ball. That's what they like to do. Because like you said, Hennigan is a guy, he's not a real game changer. He's not, like, I watched him and I was like, man, he's not really as special as I thought he was. But he doesn't make a lot of mistakes, with that veteran attitude. So, I definitely think that you'll match up better because the game will rely more on your secondary, which you think is a strength. And for those of you watching on YouTube, I'm sorry, my light here flickering out faster than our playoff hopes. So
that's good.
So,
I like that.
And so looking at his pass catchers now, they have a couple of really good guys here that you got to watch out for. So they do return 3 of their top 4 guys. The one you really need to know about is 6'3", 215-pound senior Rock Taylor. Led the team last year with almost 1,100 yards. He's the number 1 receiver so far in 2024. 9 receptions, 114 yards. No touchdowns yet so far this season, but he does have a 75% reception rate. He primarily lines up outside on the wide receiver. He's there, I think, around 100% of the time. So he doesn't really line up inside or anything, but he uses that big body size, man. He had a 71.4% contested catch rate last year and 66.7% this year so far. So he can make some catches on you. His drop pass rate was only 6.8% last year, and it's 0% through 2 games this year. So, man, he is their guy. Now, the next guy you need to know about is, and I hope I say this right, Demir Blankumsey. He is 5'10", 185 pounds. They're going to be their slot receiver. Lines up there primarily over 90% of the time. Returns after putting up 896 yards last year. So again, another really electric receiver there. He also did lead the team in touchdowns with 7 last year. He's their number 2 so far this year. 7 receptions, 96 yards, no touchdowns either there. A 70% reception rate. So again, you got some sure-handed guys here. Now, they also do have 2 big tight ends, 6'4" and 6'5". They like to use these guys in the pass game. Both of those have caught the only passing touchdowns so far this season. One guy has 2, one guy has 1. So when you look at this receiver group, it is an experienced group, and they are productive. When you put that with that very veteran, experienced quarterback, man, this is a pass. It's no wonder they had a top 10 passing offense last season. But again, like we said, man, your secondary is your strength of this defense, and this is going to be their first big test. You know, we've gave the rest of the defense a lot of crap. This is going to be their first big test. And so we're going to have to see how they hold up. But I think you feel better having to rely on a lot of those guys.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like you said, like what we've walked into the season believing was that the secondary for Florida State would be the strength of that defense. And for the first 2 games, they haven't really been challenged a lot in the passing game, that's to say. Now, in the run game, it's a little bit different. But in the passing game, they haven't been challenged as much. Well, this game will likely challenge that. Now, whether or not they're challenging down the field or they're challenging him 15 yards out, but more so in that short passing game. Can we be aggressive? Adam Fuller loves to play the man defense, man to man. And so, are we going to be able to walk up and jam those wide receivers and get them off their route? Are we going to be able to play tight coverage against them? I was trying to think, like, who are they going to put on Rock? I mean, first of all, what a name, Rock, right?
I know, right?
And so who are they going to put on him? Is that AZ? Is that Fentro? Because that's their number 1 receiver. And you'd imagine they're going to put AZ on him.
Yeah.
Or Fentro, one of the two. And so Cypress. And so I'm curious to see how Adam Fuller plays the chess match with them. Again, do they double bracket him? Do they put a safety over top of the corner to make sure that, like, we're just going to take him away, force them to try to go to the other receivers? What do they do with those tight ends? Because if those tight ends end up on the linebackers, Lord Jesus, we might as well go ahead and just head on home for the day.
We're in trouble.
We're in trouble. And I don't mean to be so negative. I'm just speaking facts here.
They have trouble covering. But I also think, too, like, open field tackling is going to be critical in this game. Because, like we said, they distribute the ball to their playmakers, and then they let their playmakers make the plays most of the time. So you're going to have to be – tackling is going to be of the utmost importance in this game, because if you let these guys get loose and you don't have a whole lot of help on the backside, they can turn – like we talked about Hakeem, they can turn a 4-yard pass into a 40-yard touchdown just as quick as you can.
That's right.
Now, when you talk about that ground game, Memphis had some really big shoes to fill last year with Blake Watson departing, and he put up over 1,600 yards last year. Then you have number 2 back Sutton Smith go out for the year. So they have some holes to fill, but their back, man, he's impressive. When you talk about Mario Anderson coming in, he was extremely productive at a D2 school, Newberry, over with 2 1,000-yard seasons. He is a D2 All-American. Then he goes and transfers to South Carolina, where he led the Gamecocks in rushing with 712 yards in 2023. That's our farm team, man. I don't know how we
It is
missed
our
on
farm
this
team.
one. We should have grabbed him. We should have got him instead of maybe Roy Dell or whatever. That's our farm team. So Shane Beamer, we're going to need you to find us another guy there. But he does lead the team in 2024, 27 attempts, 171 yards, 6.3 yards per carry, and 4 touchdowns. And man, when I watched him, I mean, he's electric. He had one where he just jumped over a guy. He runs over people. He's hard to bring down. In that Troy game, man. Now the first game was pretty rough. He didn't do a whole lot there, but that Troy game, 17 attempts, 124 or 125 yards, 7.4 yards per carry, and 2 touchdowns. I mean, this guy is good. So I mean that worries me because again, we haven't shown the ability to stop the run yet. The 1-2 punch is Greg, and I actually put a pronunciation on here because I thought I was going to get it wrong. Dewuzie, he is the number 2 back, 12 attempts, 65 yards, and 1 touchdown. He originally started his career at Louisville and then went to UMass. Now, he's a pretty good playmaker too, but that Mario Anderson kid, man, he is the guy you got to watch. Now, to close out the offense here with the guys up front, last year they lost 3 starters from last year. And another really significant piece. So they brought in a ton of transfers. They went to the portal, got a lot of guys. Now, I think one of the reasons that you saw the difference between game 1 and game 2 was you had to see him settle in on some guys, right? 3 of the 5 starters are first-year transfers. But when you look at their left tackle, he's a third-year guy, and these aren't necessarily counting redshirt years. Third-year guy, 1,060 snaps. Their left guard, fifth-year guy, 1,227 snaps, LSU transfer. Center is a 6-year guy, 1,857 snaps. Right guard, 5th-year guy, 2,200 snaps. Right tackle, 4th-year guy, 2,300 snaps. These guys have a ton of experience. They're 56 in yards per carry at 4.91, which isn't terrible, almost 5 yards a carry. Their pressure rate they gave up 28.1% pressure rate against North Alabama. That's pretty high. So they're not perfect. They're experienced, but they're not perfect. Hear me say that. They've only given up 1 sack this year, and then 16.7% against Troy. It did come down a lot. But again, there were a lot of plays I saw where it got blown up in the backfield. I mean, it's not the most intimidating group. I will say that. And they have not faced a Power 5 defensive line. And no matter how you feel about Florida State's defensive line, when you see North Alabama and you see Troy and you actually just look at the physical stature of the athletes that they have, this is going to be like fighting me or fighting Mike Tyson. It's going to be a massive, massive upgrade in the challenge that these guys have to face. So they're experienced, but they haven't seen anything like Florida State's defensive line. But man, again, very experienced group with a very productive running back behind them.
Yeah, absolutely. When I watched the tape of this offensive line, I think you could see the experience of them. You can see the kind of the grizzled veterans that have been there for a while. They're not going to beat themselves. They're not a heavily penalized team. They're not gonna hurt the offense. And so you're going to have to force it. You're going to have to be more attacking. You're going to have to be sound in your gap schemes and your run fits, right? You're going to have to communicate because they're just not going to beat themselves. And now again, like you said, this was against Troy and they struggled to run the ball. Maybe that was the game plan. Maybe it wasn't against Northern Alabama, but against Troy, and again, it's Troy, but man, they were opening holes there, big holes. And so if Florida State does not come ready, if they don't come ready to fight and they play with the same kind of effort they've been playing with against Georgia Tech and Boston College, this offensive line will wear them down over time, and then you'll start seeing those big gaping holes again, those 15, 20, 25, 40-yard chunk plays on the run game. And so Florida State, again, has to come aggressive. They have to be the aggressors, especially that defensive line. It's time that we see that $2 million go to work, okay?
Right.
I fully believe, because we've seen it before. We've seen how dominant Pat Payton can be. We've seen, or at least we've heard a lot, and he looks really impressive, how Darrell Jackson can be. We've seen Josh Farmer be very dominant, right? We've heard bits and pieces about MJJ, Marvin Jones Jr. be extraordinary. Now it's time to actually put it on display.
Yeah.
And again, I think this is the same thing. The same question we were talking about with DJ and do you bring Brock in for some series or whatever? I think the same thing is this. If you don't see that defensive line really making strides and dominating the line of scrimmage, man, don't wait. Bring those other guys in early and make those guys sit and say, hey, you can sit your little happy $2 million butt right over here and watch these guys play on you and watch your NFL stock get worse and worse and worse. Because if you're not going to play with energy and effort, if you're not going to fight, you have no place on this field. And this is not me being mean to them. Hey, those guys are Florida State Seminoles. I'm all for them. I want to support them. But man, if you're not going to play tough, if you're not going to get in there and fight with everything you got and bully the offensive line instead of getting bullied, you don't deserve to be on that field.
And frankly, this is a game that you should. I mean, there was a lot of times where Troy was able to reset the line of scrimmage 2-3 yards in the backfield. So this is a game where they should eat in this game. I mean, they really should. And I think they will approach it differently, because you don't have that mobile quarterback. I think they will kind of let these guys pin their ears back a little bit and kind of come after them a little bit. I think they'll bring more pressure in this game to try and stop the run. And again, because you feel good about your secondary, you want to make them throw the ball. And so I think you're going to see them like, look, if we can't do good things with our linebackers, let's just send them. And let's just see what happens. But you should be able to eat in this game. So now let's flip over and talk about the FSU offense versus the Memphis defense. And now we know Memphis runs that 3-3-5 defense. And I'm going to, man, I got some stats for you too, but I got to say over here, like, this is the same thing. You should win the line of scrimmage in this game. This defense was not that impressive. They played a couple of bad teams. This was a terrible defense last year. I don't think they got a whole lot better. They did get a new defensive coordinator, but he was an internal promotion. He was their linebackers coach last year. So it's probably a lot of the same scheme. They did take some pieces in the portal, but I don't know, man. I think this is one that this can be a get right game for your offense. Now, again, Florida State's EPA per play on offense is ranked 95th. Memphis, right now, their defense and EPA per play on defense is 26th. So, again, the stats go the other way. You're 108th in success rate. They're 41st. So, they have the edge there. Your third down and fourth down success rate, you are 78th in the country at 34.4%. Memphis is 104th in the country, 44.7%. So, they're not perfect either here. Florida State has only put up 8 explosive plays this season, but Memphis has given up 4, so not a whole lot there. So, it's just kind of a bad offense versus a bad defense in a way here. You hate to say that, but that's kind of where it is right now. Red zone scoring, Florida State is actually 3 of 3, 100% in the red zone, but it's only 1 touchdown, 2 field goals. So you got to start getting points, because this is a Memphis team that's going to, they're going to get touchdowns in the red zone. And right now you haven't shown the ability to stop that. Now, Memphis has allowed 3 or 4 scores in the red zone, 2 touchdowns, 1 field goal. And when you look again, their new defensive coordinator, Jordan Hankins, was a guy that was there. He served for the DC in a bowl game. It's really his first time being a DC. And I think when you look at the first 2 games, one thing I did notice about them, and this is where I think Florida State has an opportunity here, I think you can wear them down throughout the course of the game. Now, we've talked about how we don't want them to rotate excessively like they have in the past. But against North Alabama, they played 39 guys in that first game. And I think they were just trying to figure out who they had, because they had a lot of pieces to replace. But then against Troy, only 19 guys played. So they really honed down, and they do not rotate a lot of bodies. They really kind of ride with their guys. And even the guys that rotated in did not play a ton of snaps. So it is their primary starters. They ride with those guys. And so I definitely think that this is a defense here that if Florida State can lean on them a little bit and get that run game going, you can wear them out over the course of a game. And that with that 3-3-5 defense, of course, they're going to walk up linebackers. They're going to put some people on the line of scrimmage. They like to blitz. They like to bring their secondary on blitzes. So your blitz pickup is going to have to be on point, because they will shoot those gaps and they will knock your quarterback out. I mean, they did that to Troy a lot in that game. But, man, I will say, like, this defensive line, and I'll talk about the guys there, but, man, like, their linebackers are good. Their secondary is pretty good. This is a game you should dominate the line of scrimmage, because their defensive line was not scary.
Yeah, that 3-3-5 defense is very dependent upon the linebackers. That's one of the few defenses that, along with your 4-3 base defense, is where you need good linebackers, and they have pretty decent linebackers.
Yeah,
I also agree with you. That defensive line is nothing to write home about. That this is a get right game for Florida State's offensive line. This is we're going to go in there and we're going to show the country that we're not as bad as we've been performing these last 2 games. Like, we're going to move and reset the line of scrimmage 5 yards down the field, right? And that's going to take a cohesion. That's going to take, again, same thing with where we talked about the defensive line, energy and effort and a nastiness to say, you are not touching my quarterback, and hell will freeze over before you touch my running back before 4 yards, right? Like 4 yards down the field, then you can think about touching my running back. And that's what I think this offensive line has to do. And it's going to be dependent upon how Mike Norvell calls it. Honestly, listen, I know you love counter, Coach Norvell. I know you love counter. But right now, you don't need to run counter. You need to run some zone scheme where you just put a man on a hat and just say, go block the crap out of him, right? Yeah. And run that. There's a play where Memphis offense, they ran this zone blocking scheme, this kind of a not jet run, but like a read option run, but really is for the running back to keep. They ran it to the left, to the boundary side, and I just saw those offensive linemen just go like head hunting. I mean, they just went and found a man and just punched the crap out of them. And that Henderson guy just ran right up through that hole and went for a touchdown. That's what Florida State needs to do. Just go put a hat on a hat and go block somebody into oblivion, right? Because this is a get right game.
I think with this one, you just run right at them. I mean, I really do. Now they made some splash plays in the backfield against Troy, but again, that's Troy. That's Troy. But yeah, I mean, I really do feel like with this, you should be able to run right at them. And honestly, I know Maurice has kind of had some struggles this year so far, but your middle three is what you feel the best about, your two guards and your center. So I think, man, you just gotta line up. I hope to see Cam Davis gets a lot of carries in this game, because you get that kind of tough nose running back and just run right at him. But looking at that defensive line up front, Memphis, they did replace 2 starters last year off a 3-man front. But they do actually have some experience now. Their starting nose tackle is Patrick Lucas. He is 6'2", 320. So he's a chunk there in the middle of the field. He's a 5th-year guy, 685 snaps, came from Ole Miss via Indiana, so he's a 2-time transfer portal, man. It's hard to keep up with nowadays. And then their guy they rotate the most there is Derek Hunter Jr., 6'5", 265. So, I mean, he's that 265-pound nose guard. You better be pushing him off the ball. 4th-year guy out of Texas A&M, 302 snaps. Your defensive ends there, William Whitlow, 6'2", 260, 3rd-year player, 806 snaps, all at Memphis. So he's a very experienced guy in that defense. And then the one guy that I did see make some plays there was defensive end Javon Dennis, 5'11", 263, kind of a short guy, but man, he made some plays in the backfield. He kind of like hides and then pops out. 5th-year guy, 2,100 snaps of experience, started at Georgia State. This is his first year at Memphis. And then they have another 5th-year guy from Texas A&M who is their most heavily rotated defensive end. But, I mean, they're going to be looking to have a better year up front, because obviously we talked about their defensive struggles last year. They were 92nd in sacks last year, and they have not really put up a lot of sacks this year either. And that was against a backup quarterback in Troy for most of the game. So really they have struggled to create pressure. And so this is, again, man, this is what we talk about. Like, they're going to send some heat because they know that your offensive line has struggled a little bit. But this is where I feel like you can really win this game, is in the trenches. And like I talked about with that linebacking core, this is probably their strength. Now, they did lose their number 2 tackler, highest graded defensive player from last year, and they also have to replace their nickel. But they do return former East Tennessee State transfer Chandler Martin. He is their starting middle linebacker, 5th-year guy, second year at Memphis, led the team in tackles, TFLs, and sacks last year. Your will linebacker is Elijah Herring, was actually Tennessee's top tackler, the Volunteers, in 2023. So they have a nice, again, man, these linebackers are solid. The other linebacker they use is Matt Hudson, 2-year starter at Harvard, and now is over at Memphis, and he has 1,100 snaps of experience. So, I mean, just a very experienced front seven, but it's not, their linebackers are good, but man, I think you should eat in the trenches in this one. And then, of course, when you look at the back end here, they finished 2023 with the 124th ranked pass defense, giving up 268 yards a game. So hopefully the plays will be there. It's just whether we can hit them or not. That's what you're hoping for. And they did lose a couple of starters there on the back end. They lost starting safety. They lost a cornerback who actually played a season at Florida State. Malik Feaster didn't do much there. Former Jacksonville State transfer. But you have Kobe Minor as one of your cornerbacks there. 5th-year guy, 864 snaps, came out of Texas Tech and Indiana. He allowed an 80% reception rate versus Troy. So you're hoping that you can get, man, get Hakeem on this guy, please. And then you have the other one, Davion Ross, fifth-year guy, 1,600 snaps out of Eastern Kentucky, third year at Memphis. Your safeties are going to be Greg Rubin, 2,000 snaps, all at Memphis, very experienced guy there. And Darius Coffey was a guy that I saw make a couple of splash plays against Troy. He came on a couple of blitzes there, 486 snaps at Memphis as a fifth-year guy. So hasn't played a whole lot, but he stepped into that starter role this year. And then A.J. Watts, fifth-year guy, almost 2,500 snaps of experience coming out of Akron and Louisiana Monroe, first year at Memphis. So you got some experienced pieces on this defense, but, man, this defense was bad last year. They played some bad teams this year. The one offense they played that was actually even on their level, group of five, was without their center, without their running back in the first half, and without their starting quarterback for 3/4 of the game. So, man, I just think, again, like we talked about, this is a little bit of a get-right game. You got to win this one in the trenches.
Yep.
And you just have to be able to find some things. You got to be able. DJ's got to have a better game. I mean, point blank, period. Or you got to turn to Brock. And then also, I'm really looking for Hakeem to kind of have a statement in this game because there were some plays that Troy made. They had a lot of penalties, a lot of just mishaps, and that backup quarterback just wasn't ready for the moment.
Right.
So with that being said, man, let's just get into some keys and predictions here. And now that we've covered offense and defense, I know we're coming up running this one a little bit long on you, but there's just so much to talk about with this, man. Florida State just needs this win so bad. And so, really, I just kind of talked about it. For me, my number one key in this game is to control the line of scrimmage. Look, Memphis is a good team. They are very well coached. They are very disciplined. You're going to have to beat them because, like you said, there's a lot of guys on here that are not going to beat themselves. But when I watched the tape and I watched that Troy game and I looked in the trenches, I was like, man, this is not an intimidating group. Now, granted, Georgia Tech and Boston College are not world beaters up front either, but you got some all ACC guys there and stuff like that. You should have a size advantage. You should have a talent advantage. I think you got to win the line of scrimmage here because, one, that's going to open up the run game to give you some pass, give you some help in the pass game there. And then, two, if you win the line of scrimmage on the other side, you're going to, please, for the love of goodness, do not give up 200 yards again in this game on the ground and get some pressure. You got to get some pressure on Hennigan. You cannot let him sit there and pick you apart. And then my second key, I only got two for this one, man. Don't give up freebies. And that goes on both sides. If you get a wide open touchdown, you have got to hit it. Don't have these blown coverages. Don't let these wheel routes go uncovered out of the background, or out of the backfield. Don't give up freebies. Play discipline, play smart. Don't beat yourself because Memphis, like we said, is not going to do that. So only two keys, man. Got to control the line of scrimmage, and then don't give up the freebies. And I think if you do that, you have such an advantage from a athlete standpoint. You're at home, all this type of stuff. You've had some games. You're coming off a bye week. They're not. They have to travel to you. Man, this is a very intimately losable game. You should win this game. And I think just that advantage, and if you can do those things, I think you'll be fine.
Yeah, I think my keys, I have three. I think number one, Florida State's got to play their game. I think Mike Norvell had the right game plan against Georgia Tech. It just did not get executed very well. I think they got to get back to that. They cannot put this on DJ to try to win this game. No. This is on the skill players and the offensive line and the running backs, and then sprinkle DJ in as their short throws, play action on those short throws to set up deep throws later on. You need at least, I would say in this game, you need at least three to four deep shots per half. And, if you're up a lot of points, then, man, how about try to get Brock in there just to even see? Like, my hope is that they have some packages ready to go for Brock and that we're going to see him in the game. It might be just good just to have DJ come off and watch the offense himself. And so I hope they have some packages for Brock, but just play your game, man. Call the game the way that you built this team for, okay? And trust that offensive line, those running backs, those wide receivers are going to do just enough so that DJ doesn't have to win this game. Now, obviously, if it's not happening, then you need to go to your backup. You need to get Brock in there if DJU is not performing. So that's number one.
Yeah, and I will say to that, like, I do think people have this weird fantasy that, like, Brock's just gonna come in and throw, like, 28 of 30 for 303 touchdowns. It's probably not gonna happen. Now, I understand the argument that you wanna roll with the guy who's gonna be here to help you fix this next year and not DJ, and I'm with you on that. I've said the same thing 20 times. I do hope that you at least see some packages for him.
Right.
So I think that does a couple of things, right? One, that puts DJ on notice that, like, hey, look, we are going to start grooming this other guy. So if you can't get the job done, we'll find someone who can. And then two, it just lets you know what you got with Brock.
Right.
Like at least you can see, and at least it just changes things up a little bit. But yeah, man, I think that's interesting, the way to look at it too.
Yeah, absolutely agree. I think I hope they have some pre-planned packages ready to go for Brock that they're going to actually use, whether they're winning or losing.
Right.
I think number two, you got, like you said, you got to dominate the line. I think both offensively and defensively. And this is really for the defense. I mean, the offense, yes, please dominate that. Sorry, excuse for a defensive line. But you're also our defense line's also been a sorry excuse for a defensive line. So I need you to dominate that offense. I need you to show up and be those big bad boys and play nasty Florida State football. Make them fear you again. And then the last thing is, you remember, I don't know if you ever played the game Mortal Kombat, but you know, when you were able to beat a player without you losing any health, they called it what? Flawless victory. This is what Florida State needs. You need a flawless victory. I mean, you need to just polarize them. Now, I don't think it's going to be a polarizing. I think it's going to be really close, but it'd be nice if you could get a flawless victory.
Yeah, you need anything. I mean, if you win 28-27, it's a win. It's not going to be pretty, but I think it gets you some positive momentum going into a game against a tough Cal team.
Right.
You know, and then you go on the road to SMU, and then you got Clemson coming to town. You need some positive momentum, because if you start 0-3, man, it's just oosh. I mean, it's downhill from there. You might as well burn the thing down and start over with the youth movement at that point almost. But I think if you can get that win, but like you said, man, if you can come out and you can win and you can just kind of like, again, like the tone has just been different after that bye week. And I know the tone can be great, but that you got to actually go and show up on game days. You know, Kyle Morlock's had a great week of practice. I don't care unless it looks like it's supposed to on Saturdays. I just don't want to hear it. I want to go see it. And I think they need to show it this week. But if you can come out and you can beat a solid Memphis team, and look, we talk about this Memphis team, like Florida State should win this game by 20 points.
That's right.
But this is a good Memphis team. They are not bad. But you got to come out and prove it. And I think if you could come out and win this by multiple scores, it's very much a get-right game and gives you some confidence going forward. So with that being said, man, let's get into some picks. I'll let you go ahead and give yours first.
You want me to be the enemy, don't you?
I do. I want you to be the bad guy. We'll play good cop, bad cop, and I'll let you be the first one. You go first. Okay. You go rough them up real quick.
Okay, I'll go rough them up real quick. Listen, like I told you, I believe that this is fixable. I really do. There were those 7 things I mentioned at the top of this episode, I think are all fixable. The question I've been asking myself during the bye week and this week is, how long is it going to take? How long is it going to take before we actually see what this offense was supposed to be? Before we actually see what this defensive line was supposed to be? Listen, the linebackers, it is what it is. There's no hope for them. We just got to hope that they can just, be in the right space. Let's just get there first. But with this offense and this defensive line, I think it's all fixable. I think the question is, how long does it take? And right now, Jesse, I can't break my heart anymore. I just can't. So I'm actually going to predict that Memphis wins the game 24-21, but you see progress on both sides of the ball on the line of scrimmage. You actually see that they're making moves to get better, but I just think the confidence, I think there's just something that's still just off a little bit about this team. And I think it's going to take more than 3 games to get it right. So until I see it, I can't, I just don't feel confident picking Florida State. And I know it's against Memphis. I know you guys are going to ridicule me in the comments. I'll take it. And guess what, guys? I would love to be wrong.
I feel you, man. I mean, I think you bring up a lot of good points. Like, how much got fixed in the bye week? How much effort do we see? It's a sleepy noon game against a group of 5 team. I don't know how, honestly, after an 0-2 start, I don't know how much of the student section is going to be there by the start of the second quarter.
That's right.
So I think all those things play against you. I think, you will see a better game day experience. You will see the war chant. Mike Norvell commented on that this week. So the game day experience should be fixed. But again, it's a sleepy noon game. It's going to be hot. And so you just question how much got fixed and how much effort there is there.
Right.
And so, like I said last week, man, I said I wasn't going to pick Florida State probably to win another game until the Charleston Southern game because I needed to see it. We're in a holding pattern right now. Like we said with this team, I want to believe, but I can't believe until I see it.
Right.
And so I look at this pick, man, and I'm like, Memphis is a team that if you let them beat you, they're going to take advantage and they're going to beat you. And so I battle back and forth and I think about it. And I'm like, man, I feel like I want to pick Memphis to win. And then, I just think to myself that
I just can't do it. That's really the bottom line. I can't do it.
I can't do it. Give me Florida State 27-24. It's going to be a close one, but I think the bye week is the difference. I think this team just kind of refreshed themselves a little bit. I was saving that one for you. I had to bring Jameis out here, man. Some good vibes. I'm still the bug into the bug zapper, man. I just keep running into the lights. So I don't know. That's not covering, and it's not a pretty win. But at this point, I think you just need momentum.
You just need a win.
You just need a win. And so I think they do get the win this week. I just think it's going to be close, and I hope I'm wrong. I hope that they win big, man. But if they don't win this one, damn it, Florida State, I'm not picking you anymore the rest of the season except for maybe Charleston Southern, and that might be on the fence.
And that might be on the fence.
I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt one more time. And the only reason I'm saying that is because just when I watched Memphis in that Troy game, I was not blown away, right? I haven't watched a lot of Memphis football. I look at their stats, I read them, and I'm like, oh, these look good. When I watched it, I just was not overwhelmed by that Memphis team. And then I think you come off the bye week, you get Hakeem Williams back. I know losing Jalen Lucas is tough, but man, I think Hakeem can be a game changer for this offense. I know that people are going to be really frustrated when DJ rolls out there. You just hope he can have a better game, or at least Mike is brave enough to go with Brock.
Yeah.
But man, I just think coming off the bye week at home with a Memphis team that has not faced, I know we're 0-2 and I know we look bad, but they have not faced an opponent of this caliber yet with just these athletes. So I think it's going to be an adjustment for them too. And so, man, I'm just going to take Florida State to win in a close one.
Yep. I totally understand it. Listen, last year they played Missouri and they went on, was it on the road or at home?
Yeah, it was in Missouri.
It was in Missouri, and they lost 34-27. They put 27 points up against a Missouri team that won 10 games last year.
Yeah.
They were in that game. They beat an Iowa State team 36-26 in their bowl game last year. So yeah, while they only play one Power 5, Power 4 school during the year, they play them pretty tough. And so I hope you're right, Jesse. I would love for you to be right. I just want a W. I'd love for it to be a blowout. I'd love to be able to walk out with my beer muscles and be super excited. I don't drink beer, but I'd love to get some because Florida State gave me the confidence to have beer muscles. And so, yeah, I hope we are walking. We're on this post game on Saturday celebrating our first win of the season.
Yeah. And I will say that, like, with the 20 points and 29 game streak, what makes me nervous is that I would bet, if I had to make one bet that I felt like I had to put my mortgage on, it's that they're going to get 20 points. The question will be, can this offense muster enough life?
That's right.
To get some points, because BC's defense was not great. Georgia Tech's defense was not great the last year. And, we don't know what they're going to look at like over the course of a season this year, but this is another bad defense. Can you finally put up the numbers that you should against defenses that aren't great? So it's going to be a bit of a race to probably somewhere around 30 points. And I don't love the idea of picking Florida State to score 30 points, but man, I just really hope that bye week did them some good. And we'll see, man. We'll see. Like I said, we'll be on this post game. I'm trying to be positive, guys. I'm trying. I might talk to me 4:00 on Saturday. It may not be so positive. With that being said, guys, make sure you check out that post game show on Saturday. Just give us like a few minutes after the game wraps up, and we'll be on to diagnose whatever happens, whatever the outcome is with you guys. We're not going to hide from it, or we're going to be here to celebrate. We've been waiting on a win for a long time. So hopefully we get one. Also, make sure you check out the Autograph app to stay up to date on everything that our content's in there as well. So make sure you check that out. I'll link it below. And then before we get out of here, guys, I just want to end. We're going to end the show a little bit differently today. Typically we end it the same way we always do with the Gold Nose and all that stuff. But, we talk a lot at Plant the Spear about this is a family that we have. And I know that the season hasn't gone the way that we want. And sometimes there's animosity among fan base and negativity and stuff. But, man, at the end of the day, life is bigger than football.
That's right.
And there are some things in life that sometimes mean more to us than the game, no matter what Florida State's record is. And, like I said, we're a family here at Plant the Spear. And very recently, this past week, we lost one of our own. And so we want to end the show a little bit differently. We want to pay our respects to our dear friend and PTS family member, Ed Lambert. He was a lifelong Florida State Seminole fan. We want to send our prayers and our thoughts out to his family and his son, Chuck, who is another member of the PTS family, and that has been a longtime listener as well. Ed was a big part of what we do here, just from a friend of the show perspective. So, man, it's a tough loss. Cancer sucks, man. It's not fair. Life's not fair. He was way too young for this. And so, man, it's a tough loss. And we want to end the show with a little tribute to him. And so, Michael, I don't know if you have any final words. I don't want y'all to see me get emotional here on the show, but, man, it's a tough loss for us. And so we're sending our prayers out to his family because, we really loved Ed, and he was a big part of the PTS family.
Yeah, man. To Chuck and to Ed's family, we're with you. We've been praying for you. We've been, thinking about you, and we knew how much PTS meant to Ed, and how he was a loyal fan and would listen and watch and comment. And we're so sorry for you guys' loss. And, man, what I want to do, Jesse, is I just want to tip my cap to Ed, say, man, go Noles, Ed, go Noles.
Yeah, I know. I guarantee you, he's probably already found Coach Bowden up there, and he's going to have the best seat in the house on Saturday. So
that's right.
With that being said, guys, we appreciate you tuning in. And Ed, this one's for you, my friend.